lesson, and so tell me, let's just talk about your feelings about the lesson and how you think it went overall.
Okay, well, I was actually really surprised by it. The class is a little boy heavy, so I was a little concerned that it would be, they want to be into the whole artist thing, and the art thing's a little, too much. But they really loved it, and I was really impressed by how engaged they were and how interested they were in the topic, and I felt like they really understood it. Looking at their center work and walking around and helping them out, and a lot of them made a really, really good thoughts, and they had a lot of good ideas, and I was really impressed by all the engagement and the interest in the topic itself.
Good. So tell me, we talked a lot when we did your pre-observation conference about what you were going to be teaching. So tell me what you noticed about what you wanted the students to learn, that compare contrast.
I noticed a lot of students right away. I think a lot of them did have the background knowledge that I was hoping for with the similarities and differences. Right away when we were talking about the two different paintings, I noticed that students were, before I even asked them to compare and contrast the two, they were already making their own inferences based on how they were similar. Oh, this one was really bright and this one was really dark, so this one looked sadder. And even though I hadn't asked anything, they were already doing it on their own, which was really good.
So they had some background knowledge about that coming in. Good.
And then when they were asked to compare and contrast two students in the classroom, immediately they knew exactly what to do with the similarities and differences there. So I was really impressed by that.
That's great. All right. Well, there were some things that I want to just talk about my observations of the lesson, and I just basically took some notes while I was sitting there, and I'm going to just talk about those with you. I really liked that you started with the art. I think it kind of caught them off guard because they don't usually see that, and it was good to put that in the introduction. Perhaps, and as I went through the lesson, as I was watching it, I thought that maybe, because you talked a lot about how does the art make you feel, and I thought, would that be confusing later on to them, finding similarities and differences? Are my feelings involved with that? So, but I'm not sure that really played any part in it. It was just a feeling that a noticing that I had. I noticed that, and I know this was kind of a small class, but I noticed that you seemed to be okay, which is your preference, with a little student chatter. And so they were kind of chit-chatting in the beginning, but that didn't seem to faze you. You got them right back on task, and I thought that was good. Okay, so as you were doing this introduction, I noticed that you asked the students questions, and you called on students, like you called on Evan, said, Evan, what do you see? And then you called on another student, what do you see? So I guess I'm wondering, how could you get more students involved, kind of thinking, because I wonder, when you call on Evan, because you said his name first, and then you asked that question, was everyone else thinking about the question in their head? How do you think you might be able to get more students involved in that?
So what I could do differently next time is I could ask the question and then have students pair up with a partner and then talk about the question before I even draw a stick or anything at that. So have students actually discuss it amongst themselves and then answer the question.
Yeah, I think some good paired or partnered discussion right then would have been great. I mean, you could have said, think about what you see. That's the question that you asked. Turn to your partner, even that think, pair, share, where they think about it first, they partner, and then they can share out. I think that would be a really good thing to add there.
I agree.
Let's move on to the teaching aspect. Really good modeling and examples. I think the part where you took it out of the academic realm and you just put it in a little fun, how are these students like, how are they different, really kind of drove your point home on similarities and differences. I thought that was great. And then you modeled the Venn, you did that class Venn with them, which was perfect. I wondered, then you transitioned them from that point, they were still on the carpet, and you transitioned them back to their seats. Can you tell me why you called them one by one back to their seat?
I've noticed in the classroom that sometimes when you do a whole group transition with them, they get a little off task, and I wanted them to remain focused, and sometimes if they all go at one time, they start talking, and then they're completely off task, and then it would take me longer to get them back on the topic. Instead of like calling them one by one, I could have called them by, if you're wearing black shoes, then get up, and then that way it would take a little less time to get them all.
Yeah, I think that it was okay with the number of students you had, but if you get in a classroom with 22 students, that's going to take a very long time, and I think that actually they would lose more focus if you're calling them one by one, and it takes 5 or 6 minutes.
Right. Okay.
So calling them by team, by color of their shirt, something like that might be something that you want to look into in the future. Then you asked them, you went ahead and you went into your read aloud, which you did together, and it was the first article, I think, where you were going to do some comparing and contrasting. And then you asked them to do the last paragraph, underline the similarities, and circle the differences. And then you kind of went over that. But what I noticed was, again, you called on the students individually.
Right, okay.
And so perhaps think about what you might have done.
Okay, so maybe the next time I might have them write on a piece of paper or something the similarities and differences that they found, and then I could collect that and look at that for type of a summative, but not really summative for that.
Yes, that's very true, but I might even, after they've underlined and circled, do that whole partner share again.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And say, all right, turn to your partner and share your similarities and differences and see if they're, they picked up on the same ones, or because that's a whole nother set of similarities and differences. Are my answers similar to someone else's, or are they different, and why?
Okay, yeah.
Because then you get into that critical thinking of, I'm going to defend why I chose this as a similarity or a difference.
Okay,
so I think I would still use that partner talk a little bit. Yes, you asked the question, someone tell me what's the same and what's different. So it was still that one person instead of involving them all together. Let's see. So the question then, you gave them, you gave them index cards next, and you had facts on them, and they came up and placed them in the Venn diagram. So my question was, the things that they underlined and circled on their own paper, what did they end up doing with that?
They didn't end up doing anything with it. So I think that maybe next time what I would probably do, well, I mean, they shared their work. So, I mean, throughout they would underline and circle, but I just ended up collecting it. So I used that as kind of a formative assessment for them.
But you couldn't really look at them then because you were in the middle of the lesson.
Correct.
So perhaps even providing them with a sticky note so that they could write a similarity or a difference, or pulling sticks and a student comes and writes a similarity. If you have that same similarity, check it on your paper so that one's not given.
Yeah, I like that.
And then someone else they come up and they write a difference if that one's the same. And that way you kind of know then what's left, what other similarities or differences are left. Because I think if I were the student, my question would have been, what was the point of me underlining and circling those things? I don't even have any feedback on that.
Right.
And that could have been a good practice.
I think next time, too, if I did something like this, I would want to use a document camera, because this time I didn't even use the document camera. So when I say to underline and circle, I mean, I was just walking around and just briefly glancing and see if they did it. But I think if I had a document camera, I could actually show them what their paper should look like. And it would be more meaningful that way.
I think it would be as well. And you can show student work under that. That's good. All right, so then you went on to the centers. Can you explain to me what the 3 centers were?
Okay, so the first center, I had students, they were given, again, 2 paintings, and they were doing similar to what we had done in the very beginning. They had to compare and contrast the 2 paintings in a Venn diagram. The second one, they were given an assortment of paintings, so they could pick which ones they wanted to do. So, for example, I gave them 2, I think, from Salvador Dali and 2 from Picasso. And then they would pick one from Picasso, one for Salvador Dali, and then they would write a paragraph of similarities and differences. So instead of doing it in a Venn diagram, they were writing this next one.
Okay.
And then in the very last one, we were talking about Surrealism and Cubism. So Surrealism is Salvador Dali and Cubism is Picasso. Well, I gave them examples so they could look at pictures, but then I made them draw in a type. So draw in Surrealism or draw in Cubism, a different type. And then as they were working together at the center, so if one student did Surrealism, one student did Cubism, they would talk about how their drawings were similar and different.
Okay. So I have two wonderings from
Mhm.
that, things
Okay.
that I noticed, things that I wondered.
Mm-hmm.
In the center where they wrote
Right.
the sentences,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see you model that for them.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And that becomes a whole new set of circumstances for
Mhm.
students.
Right.
Taking it from a then or something I underline
Mhm.
and putting that in paragraph form. How do I
Right.
start it? What's my
Mhm.
topic sentence?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they're writing about the two artists, they could
Mhm.
say, you know, Dali and Picasso are two artists from the whatever era.
Right. Okay.
The ways that they are similar are
Mhm.
blah 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 blah, and the ways that they are different are,
Mm-hmm.
but both have beautiful paintings.
Right.
So they need that model of
Mhm.
how do I put that summary sentence
Right.
together and talk about that.
Mhm.
So I think that could be something that you could think about
Yeah,
for next time
absolutely.
as well. The other one was, I got lost in the vocabulary of Surrealism and
Mhm.
Cubism. And I think that, and I understand what you were doing comparing two styles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know that they picked up on
Yeah,
that.
probably
I
not.
think they
Mhm.
understood that there were two different styles. They
Mhm.
don't know what they were necessarily
Right.
called. And so it could have been maybe a little model of a
Mhm.
picture and the definition, like a little tent that you
Mhm.
sit there so they could refer to that.
Okay.
And that way those words
Mhm.
could be in their
Okay.
vocabulary then.
Okay.
Let's see. So tell me how you gave some feedback during the centers.
Okay, so I walked around to each center as students were working, and I would give specific feedback. For example, one student, Michael, was working, and I asked him, he was in the very first center when they were doing the two compare and contrast with the Venn diagram, and I asked him what he thought about the two pictures and then what he had written so far, and he explained to me his thinking process and how he had gotten to where he was getting, and that's how I got some of that feedback from there. And then I knew he was on the right page, so I would move on to the next student. So with the class being so small, it's really easy
Mhm.
to go around student by student that way. And then if students had specific questions, of course they could raise their hand and I would come around them.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I also had a clipboard though, and I had their names, and so I would make notes
I
about.
noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what evidence do you have, now
Mhm.
that the lesson is over, what evidence do you have that they understood that they can actually demonstrate mastery
Right.
of comparing and contrasting?
So my summative assessment, I required them to do, again, a summary of 2 similarities and 3 differences based on another article that I provided them with the difference between Cubism and Surrealism.
Mm-hmm.
So at this time, they had to read the article entirely by themselves and then write 2 similarities and 3 differences.
Right.
So even though I walked around, I collected that as a summative assessment, and I can look at that student work and determine which students understand similarities and which ones understand differences.
So do you know?
I think so, yes.
Okay. All right. So do you have students that did not master that?
I do. I have 2
Okay.
students that did not master.
So where do you think you'll go from here?
Okay, so what I noticed with those students is I think it's less of the similarities and differences and more of the actual content that we were studying. I think the art concept was a little complicated. So I think with those 2 students, maybe sometime next week I'll pull them into the back and I'll give them a different type of material to work with, such as 2 different animals. How are they similar or different, or something like that. That's more
That's good.
basic
thinking.
and less artistic.
Okay. All right. So now let's talk about a goal.
Okay.
Let's talk about things for improvement. And we had some discussion about some things that I noticed and I wondered and asked you some questions. So what do you think if you were to look at this lesson overall and say, if I could put something into place that I think would make this lesson better or make my teaching better, what might that be?
I think a lot more think, pair, sharing. I think a lot more partner activities, like working with your shoulder partner and discussing what you have and then defending your answers with your partner. I think that would be something I would like to implement more.
I actually think I agree with you on that. So I'm going to start here in the area of growth. So
Okay.
we're gonna call it student engagement.
Okay.
Okay, and with that student engagement, specifically, we're gonna work on think, pair, share.
Okay.
Or partner share. Something that requires the students to talk or share their own work before they share it with you.
Mm-hmm.
That way they're getting feedback from another student before they're getting feedback from you, because let's face it, you can't ask every individual student a question. So they're getting feedback, and it allows them a little time to process what they've done, and some accountability in there as well. I do think your strength, your lesson plan was great. I think that you think through a lot of things that possibly could go wrong, and I sometimes think you overthink it, but it's still a strength. Like for instance, your transitions, you knew how you were going to do those transitions. That was very strong. So I think that what you're doing in your lesson plans is definitely preparing you for teaching the lesson. So your area of growth is going to be student engagement, so you're going to put more think, pair, share, and more partner share in there. So how do you think you're going, I want you to really think about this. Where would you find some resources that could show you how other teachers are doing think, pair, share, and partner?
I could always, I might want to talk to you or talk to my other professors and talk about how they've done think, pair, shares in the past. And even my fellow students, I know a lot of them were implementing that in their lessons. And so I could talk to them and see how it works with them, and then what they might do differently, or how, I can implement that myself.
I also think maybe ask your cooperating teacher if you can sit back and observe a couple lessons this next week and take some notes as to how she incorporates the think, pair, share, or the partner share. And I would also recommend going on the teaching channel. I think they have actual videos about partner share and think, pair, share, and you can look at that and see how that can be used in the classroom. Okay, so that's going to be your goal, and within the next few weeks I'm going to pop in and out of the classrooms, but I'm not going to evaluate you. I'm just going to see how you're progressing towards this goal, maybe give you a little bit of feedback. And then for your next observation, which will be in about 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to see if you've met that goal. At that particular time, I'm going to evaluate you on, did she put this goal into place? How's it working in those lessons? And then we'll see whether you've met the goal, whether we need to extend that, and date of completion. My hope in this is, as we put these goals into place, it's going to take little chunks of teaching practice, instructional strategies that you can improve upon, that at the end is going to end up making you a much better teacher. And you're on your way to being a great teacher. So we're just tweaking little things that's going to put you on the right end.
Sounds
all right,
good.
So I'm going to sign here and date this, and then you're going to sign. Do you have any questions?
I don't think so. Is there anything else that you noticed that I should be focusing on? Or
I think for now, let's just do the think, pair, share. Like I said, I think you plan your lessons well, and I think if we can get more student engagement through turning and talking to your partner, you're actually going to see more of what they are learning or what they're not learning, and that may change your instructional goals a little bit. But for now, let's work on that.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.